Hey, what's up everybody? It's Dan Pickett here to bring you the final episode of the HTML show. We have created our detail screen and optimized it for a mobile-first approach. Now we're ready to expand to larger horizons and larger resolutions. So today we're going to finish things up with basically breaking down the wider resolution ratios and perspectives for the final sort of refinement of the work that we've done today. So I hope you've been enjoying this, and I hope you've been enjoying this real-world project example, watching me struggle, sort of work through some of these HTML integrations. And if you're struggling kind of keeping up or keeping tabs on what I'm doing, I hope you'll join us in the Slack chat channel. It's a wonderful place to share some code, get engaged with other students that are learning HTML and CSS just like you. We'll make sure that the opportunity to get involved in Slack, if you haven't already, is included in the show notes. All right, so let's dive into our final project work here. So when we left last episode, I shared that much of the work as it relates to the responsive nature of our grid was done well for the Launchers Also Watch section. But the work that remains is really building out the functionality for the masthead, the black top area, and then the class notes section. So if you remember in our design, what we're essentially dealing with is the need, to make this image a little smaller when we're dealing with a larger aspect ratio. And then also what we need to do is bring the previous and next buttons so that they're side by side rather than on top of each other. So we've got a little bit of work to do there. And then lastly, what we need to do is modify our class notes section so that it observes a 3-column layout. So you see in the original design, assuming that it's a desktop display, what we want to do is occupy 1 column with in all the author information, multiple columns for all of the essentially class notes section, and then another column for the statistics around that. And believe it or not, it's going to be super easy for us to tackle the class notes section. So let's just go ahead and get that done right now. And then we can close out with our previous and next and some of the masthead display items. So thankfully with Foundation, we've already sort of set the stage here for our class notes section. So all we have to do is add some additional classes to our columns here to get the effect that we're seeking. So hopefully this will get the job done. It's a little messy. We still got a little bit of work to do here. Notice that my image got incredibly small, which isn't going to fly, and that my column width is really too small. So what we might do is bump this up to large 2, which would require us to make this a large 8. Now let's see how that, that certainly looks a lot more compliant with the design. That's pretty close, pretty good. Now notice that this bar actually extends only to the first 9 columns or first 10 columns of the display. So we want to make sure that we observe that pattern as well. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to set this to large 10. So basically the grid is divided up into 12 columns, and we've allocated 10 columns for this H2, and then 2 columns for the author information, 8 columns for all of the notes, and then another 2 columns for all the statistics. So you always want to make sure that every row adds up to 12 columns in all, and you often have to do a little bit of math to get the result that you're seeking. So now our underline only extends as far as the content column here. So we're pretty well in compliance. I mean, we could do some more tweaking here in some real fine sort of refinements, like the margin here needs to go all the way to the left and be flush, but I don't think it would be valuable to walk you through that in great detail here. So we're going to move on to the masthead section. All right, so for the masthead section, we've got really just a couple of challenges. A, we want this video screen to not occupy such a large aspect of the real estate, and then also we want the previous and next buttons to be side to side. So let's tackle the previous and next buttons first, kind of work our way up the document. All right. So we're looking at our main episode navigator. So we're going to go to that section. And you can start to see here how we've got a couple of media queries. And we're going to need additional media queries for the purposes of our document here. So let's see how this changes as we adjust to a mobile display. All right. So the border right, we only want to display at 400 pixels of width. So that should disappear when we go this far, because that's not 400 pixels. Unless, let's find out. Computed. Yes, less than 400 pixels there. So that border should be going away, our border right here. Our media max width of 400 pixels. That border bottom should also go away, which it does. All right, so that media query is working properly. Let's open up our mobile display again here. And there we go. We don't get that right bar. Okay, so that's functioning the way that it's supposed to on a mobile display. Now let's get it functioning well on a desktop display. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to adjust our display here to reflect more of a grid layout. So what we can do is we can actually embrace foundations work here. I accidentally undid that. All right. So we can embrace foundations work here to make this section compliant with foundation. So we're going to say here that we want it to be the full width. And these need to be classes. And we want to do the same here. Let's see if that's adversely affected our mobile experience. It really has. Wow. I did not expect that to create that adverse of a change. But sometimes that happens as you incorporate frameworks. So let's go to our mobile display here and see what's happening. I don't want... I think that's okay, but I want my borders. What happened to our borders there? Main episode. So let's find out what's happening to our style sheet rules. So we've got the previous episode. Previous episode. Did I introduce an error into my... I did. Hopefully this will get us back to sanity. Good, there we go, awesome. Okay, so then if I turn this mode off, now I can start to stylize these rows for larger screens. So essentially what I want to do is I want to split this in half so that they're side by side. Awesome. All right. So now all I have to do is justify this, this item to the right. Let's make sure that that is the accurate display. And actually what it wants us to do is kind of offset it so that we get that left justification. So rather than making it a large 12 or a large 6, what we're going to do is we're going to make it a large 2 with a large offset 4. I think that's the syntax. That's not going to do it. Let's do a large offset 3 with a large 3. And there we go. So we'll also want that to be in effect in symmetry of our next column. So we're going to mirror this pattern of the offsets so that this column has the same row kind of perspective. So we're going to change this to large 3 and large offset 3. Actually, we don't need the offset. We just need to constrain the width. And then I think we need to add a cap to it. And I actually need to go to the documentation here and figure out how to occupy the final 3 columns there. I know there's a way to do it. I just need to refer to the documentation. So here we go. We're going to the grid. All right, so we've got the offsets. Okay, so there's the offsets that we tackled, and then incomplete rows we'll make with an end column. So that should hopefully get us proper. Great. Okay, so now we've got probably a little bit of work to do as it pertains to some of the styling. So notice the white space that we want to introduce here. So we'll do that with a media query. So for the next episode, we'll do a margin left of, let's say, 4 REMs. Let's see how that looks. That's looking better. That's pretty much on point, actually. So there we go. We've got that aesthetic achieved. So now let's finish things out in making the image here just a little bit smaller in the context of a larger screen. So to accomplish that, we're going to actually leverage Foundation's grid framework again here. So what we can say is we're going to do small 12, and then with a large offset 2 and a large 10 or large 8. Let's see how that looks. Yep. That tightened things up more than I wanted, so I think I'm at the wrong place here. So we've got the masthead, and what I want to do is make the main video player its own row. So I'm going to actually eliminate that, and then div class equals row. Make some markup changes here. Let's see what this looks like. We've got some work to do here. I'm messing things up. So we've got our ID, masthead. Let's make that a row. Nope, we're gonna keep that the way it is. So we've got some pretty epic work to do here. I just created kind of a mess for myself a little bit here. But that's okay, that's the process. So this is the main video description. We're going to make that a row. And yep, row, column, large, 12. And then same idea here. Well, we already have it a row, so we're good. Okay, so progress a little bit anyhow. Now what I want to do is I want to center this photo or this video player, large 8, large offset 2. May have a compliance issue here. Oh, yes, I need to set these as classes, not as IDs. There we go. That's the aesthetic I was trying to achieve. And I think actually for large screens, we're also going to want to offset our text as well. So you can really start to see the power of our foundation grid framework here. Wonderful, wonderful example of how much easier foundation can make the process of building a responsive design. And we want to make sure that this is small 12. So let's see what that looks like. Excellent. So I think we're about wrapped up here. We've got our wonderful little foundation. So the last thing we're going to want to do is just go through both of our pages and make sure that we haven't caused any regressions in either the wide display or the mobile display. So we're looking really, really solid on the wide display here. So let's make sure that we look great responsively here as well. I'm going to go back to our inspector and turn on my mobile display. This is just looking excellent. Okay. Class notes. Looking good. The one thing I will say here is that probably on these smaller displays, we want this image to be centered. I think we hit a little snag with the overlay button there, so we may have to just kind of live with the appearance right now. Let's take a look and see if we can make a quick adjustment there. So we want to get this episode so that the episode thumbnail is in the center of the screen. So we've got the auto margin, which is great. So let's see what's happening. The episode thumbnail. So what happens if we set the margin to auto on the image? We don't get the centered behavior that I'm looking for. What happens if we set the text align to center? I think that's going to throw off our stack. All right, so we get the center, and then the problem is that this icon is no longer centered. So let's see if we can address that issue. Position is absolute, right. So that is our primary problem. This is absolutely positioned. on top of the item here. Episode thumbnail. So that centers our image. Yes. We could change this to an inline block. Yeah, that's still not gonna get the job done for us. So the challenge here is that we're dealing with an absolutely positioned element that needs to be on top of a dynamically positioned element. Because of the nature of the centering, we can't necessarily bind this to the item underneath. In fact, I think what we may actually have to do there is use JavaScript to calculate the absolute positioning of that button. So without using a plugin, I think we're kind of stuck with that left justification, which isn't ideal. But that's where we are right now. It doesn't look horribly bad. And we could adjust some padding there if we really wanted to. But I think we're okay for right now. Let's move on to the index page. And everything's looking good here. And we'll turn off the styling and make sure that we've got a similar display. And we do. So that's going to conclude our work here. We've done a wonderful job of incorporating the foundation framework and getting all of the design high-level touch points incorporated into our HTML documents. The last things that we would want to be doing is making sure that these pages validate, that they're fully accessible, and they meet standards. So let's go ahead and just run this through the validator real quick. We've got a warning and an error. All right, so we've got to adjust some of these errors as it relates to the placeholders. But those are totally manageable errors, so we'll be in great shape there. So we just add some alt tags, episode 1, and we'll just copy and paste this. And naturally, you know, as we add additional episode images, we would want to add proper alt tags that represent what the photo is actually trying to reflect. We're just doing this to satiate the wireframe that we've done. And we want to make sure that we also do that for the placeholders that we've introduced on the detail screen as well. All right. And we really saw the power of the foundation framework in this particular episode. I highly, highly recommend going in, diving in, reading the documentation of the foundation framework. It's got tremendous, tremendous power, and it saves me hours of time when I'm working on a responsive design. All right, let's validate this one more time. I think we'll get a warning. I think I missed, did I not refresh the page? Did I not save? So we want to make sure all of our images have alt tags. So they do. On line 26. So let's go to line 26. I see an alt tag there. So it might be a loading issue here. Let's actually take the, oh, you know what? We've ran into the issues with MAMP in the past, out of date markup. So let's just restart our servers. Refresh our page and then run through the validator one more time. It's still seeing out-of-date markup. It's got the alt tag here. So let's just view the source and send all of the source through the validator. Sometimes the web developer toolbar isn't always super reliable in terms of the information it's giving us. So we know we've already corrected those issues, so let's actually validate the markup by direct input. And we're compliant. Great. Awesome. All right, now let's do the detail page. We'll do the same thing. View the page source, copy all the source, and go to the validator and check that. And we're compliant again. We've got some warnings here. What's this warning here? Section lacks heading. That's okay. We're good with that. So we're fully compliant. So we've got fully compliant, responsive designs that are accessible because we've incorporated those alt tags, and we've really incorporated and used the power of the Foundation Grid framework here to save us a few steps and save us from the having to build thousands of media queries. The Foundation framework really saved our bacon in terms of not getting super complex as it pertains to accommodating different resolutions, different monitors and displays. Great. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you've learned quite a bit, and I hope you'll stay in touch with Launch Academy to learn about our on-campus program, our online programs, and some of the bonus content that we'll be releasing over time. It's been a pleasure helping you learn HTML and CSS, and I hope you'll continue your Learn to Code journey with me and Launch Academy. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next course.